And there, all in their order, are the sources and ends of gloomy earth, and misty Tartarus, and the unfruitful sea in starry heaven, loathsome and dank, which even the gods abhor. It is a great gulf, and if once a man were within the gates, he would not reach the floor within a whole year had reached its end, but cruel blast upon blast would carry him this way and that, and this marvel is awful even to the deathless gods. Hesiod, Theogony. Tartarus is one of the darkest and scariest places in Greek mythology. It is the ultimate prison, and the place where those wicked enough to draw the attention of the gods receive their ultimate punishment. It was here that the Titans were imprisoned following their defeat by Zeus and the other Olympians. And it was here that some of the worst mortals in history, such as Sisyphus and Tantalus, were judged to suffer in for eternity. So then, was Tartarus the original Greek underworld? Well, yes and no. Let's talk about it. Before we get any further into today's episode, I just want to quickly ask that you subscribe and like if you enjoy my content. It really helps the channel out and it motivates me to make more content. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Tartarus, as a deity, originally came into being alongside Gaia and Eros in the beginning of the universe. Tartarus is almost always depicted as a masculine figure with a towering height. However, Tartarus, unlike Gaia and Eros, isn't really focused on in his own divine form. Instead, Tartarus receives most of his mentions in the literature for his realm. Tartarus is the lowest portion of the Greek world. It is said that just as it would take an anvil 9 days and nights to fall from heaven to earth, it would also take 9 days and nights for an anvil falling from earth to reach Tartarus. Tartarus is a dark and gloomy place with a presence that presses down on you constantly. Originally, Tartarus and Hades, or Hell, were actually quite distinct from one another. Hesiod, for instance, would have viewed the two as completely separate, with the only residents of Tartarus being the imprisoned Titans and Typhon. But by the 5th century BCE, we see the two realms begin to merge together. Tartarus becomes a sort of hell within hell, and it receives the purpose it is most well known for, as the ultimate punishment. It is the realm of eternal damnation, where only the worst of horrible people, gods, and other entities are confined to. So, to attempt to answer our question from the beginning of the video, was Tartarus the original underworld? Well, in a way, yes. Remember that prior to the creation of humans, we have no real mention of death. Presumably the realm of Hades existed even during the rule of Gaia and Ouranos. However, it doesn't seem to have been in use. Even when Ouranos is castrated and removed as ruler by his son, Kronos, he doesn't actually die. Instead, he just sort of fades into the background. But Tartarus is the first place mentioned to serve as a sort of prison. Kronos confines his siblings, the Cyclopses and the 100-handed ones, within Tartarus shortly after he ascends to his throne. And of course, most famously, the Titans are imprisoned within Tartarus after their defeat. So I think we can safely say that Tartarus was the first real prison within Greek mythology. But does that make it the first underworld? Well, if we consider the fact that gods, Titans, and other deities cannot really die, as seen with Ouranos and Kronos, then in a way, being imprisoned is the closest they can get to an afterlife. If we count that imprisonment as a sort of afterlife, after all, it is technically a punishment and they were judged, then it would certainly seem as though Tartarus was the first incarnation of the underworld. Perhaps the best way to think of Tartarus is more like the underworld of the gods. In the same way that the heavens were meant for the gods while the earth was meant for humans, perhaps Tartarus is meant for the gods and other deities, while Hades is meant for humans. Of course, this kind of discounts some of the residents of Tartarus, such as Sisyphus, who was a Greek king. However, these are mostly mythological figures, who all directly interacted with the gods themselves. And when you interact directly with the gods, well, all bets are off. I'd love to hear what you think below, down in the comments. Was Tartarus the first Greek underworld, or not? And really, that is about all the mentions we get of Tartarus. The deity and the place are not really central to Greek mythology, and so we just simply don't have a whole lot of information on Tartarus itself. So for the rest of the video, let's focus a little bit on some of the most famous residents of Tartarus. Anytime you talk about the residents of Tartarus, you have to start out with the Titans. Remember from our episode on Gaia, which if you haven't checked out, you definitely should after this one, that the Titans were the sons and daughters of Gaia and the original king of the universe, Ouranos. Eventually they conspired with their mother to overthrow Ouranos, and thus Kronos, the main participant in the plot, ascended to the throne of the universe. To begin with, Kronos and his fellow Titans ruled the universe in a golden age, and were fair rulers. However, This quickly began to change as Kronos became more and more paranoid that his future children were going to overthrow him. Eventually he would be correct, and his son, Zeus, would lead the Olympian gods, among others, in overthrowing the Titans. Afterwards, many of the Titans would be imprisoned in Tartarus. The exact number of Titans imprisoned is a little unclear. For instance, we know that Oceanus, Prometheus, Epimetheus, and several of the female Titans were not imprisoned. The only Titans we know for a fact were in prison were Kronos, Iapetus, Atlas, and Menetius. Other Titans, such as Pallas and Perseus, are variously mentioned as being imprisoned, being punished in other ways, or simply allowed to remain free. Whatever the case, the Titans are without a doubt the most famous occupants of Tartarus. The other prisoners of Tartarus are almost all mortals who in some way or another offended the gods, or were simply the most horrible of people. Sisyphus is another very famous prisoner within Tartarus. Sisyphus was the founder and original king of Corinth. He brought great wealth to Corinth, but he was also a very deceitful ruler who had no care for guest rights, something that angered the gods, most especially Zeus. Eventually, Sisyphus would reveal a great secret of Zeus, and Zeus, finally pushed too far, ordered Thanatos, the personification of death, to chain Sisyphus up in Tartarus. However, Sisyphus was able to turn the tables on Thanatos and ended up chaining Thanatos himself up. With Thanatos unable to perform his duties, no one on Earth could die. This caused a massive uproar, and the war god, Ares, who had lost all enjoyment in battle since no one could die, journeyed to Tartarus, where he freed Thanatos and returned Sisyphus to the god of death. Following this, Sisyphus was sentenced to roll a massive stone up a hill in Tartarus. The catch was that this massive stone was enchanted to roll away from Sisyphus near the top of the hill, and thus he was doomed to constantly repeat the labor until the end of time. Sisyphus was doomed because he thought himself an equal to the gods, and even an equal to Zeus himself. Another famous inhabitant of Tartarus is Tantalus. Tantalus was a demigod, the son of Zeus and the nymph Pluto, not the Roman god Pluto, mind you. Tantalus committed two main crimes. Firstly, after being invited to the Olympians' table, he stole some of their ambrosia, a godly food, and told his people the secrets to making such food. The other, and much more serious crime, occurred when Tantalus sought to test the omniscience of the gods. Tantalus murdered his son, Pelops, after which he cut the boy into pieces, boiled them, and served them to the gods at a banquet. The gods immediately discovered the nature of the feast and refused to eat the boy, save for Demeter, who was so distraught at the loss of her daughter, Persephone, to Hades, that she absent-mindedly ate the boy's shoulder. Zeus ordered the Fates to return the boy to life, and the gods remade the boy, who grew to become beautiful and even favored by Poseidon. Tantalus was punished by being forced to stand in a shallow pool of water beneath a fruit tree. Whenever Tantalus attempted to reach for a piece of fruit, the tree retreated just beyond his reach, and when he bent down to get a drink of water, the pool receded just beyond his reach. Thus, Tantalus could never quite get anything to eat nor drink for the rest of eternity. Talk about a serious punishment. Other inhabitants received similarly gruesome punishments. The Danaids, a group of roughly 50 daughters of Danaus, a king of Libya, were sentenced to Tartarus after murdering their husbands. They were condemned to carry water in a jug to fill a bath, with which they could wash away their sins, and presumably leave Tartarus. However, the jugs were filled with cracks, and thus they could never quite carry enough water to fill the bath. The giant, Tityos, attempted to rape Leto, the mother of Artemis and Apollo, and after being slain by the two twins, he was sentenced to Tartarus, where he was stretched out, and two vultures would come and feast on his liver, which would then regrow, and the cycle would continue. Arche, a sister to Iris, the messenger goddess, sided with the Titans and served as their own messenger goddess. After the victory of the Olympians, her wings were removed, and she was cast down into Tartarus to suffer alongside the other Titans. Oceanus, a son of the king of Albalonga, would be sentenced to Tartarus, where he would weave a rope of straw that would be just as quickly eaten by a donkey for all of eternity. I think you get the point. The punishments of Tartarus were nothing to blink at, and only those who had committed horrible crimes, at least in the eyes of the gods, were condemned to such a place. Tartarus, at least as a deity, is not all that important in Greek mythology. Instead, it is the actual physical location of Tartarus that is important. Tartarus is the place where the worst of the worst in Greek mythology are condemned to suffer some sort of eternal punishment. It is the prison of the Titans and wicked kings like Sisyphus. It is the deepest and darkest place in Greek mythology, and it serves as a warning to all of what should happen to them if they live a despicable life. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. I am sorry that this video is a little short, but Tartarus himself is really not discussed much in Greek mythology, but I hope I have done him justice. If you have any comments or questions on the video, or believe I've made a mistake, please comment down below, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It really helps the channel out. Peace.